Moving on now, she is the President and Chief Executive Officer of one of America's premier agribusiness and food companies. Beth Ford was a guest last week at a Heuerman Lecture titled Uncharted Waters, Why Everyone Should Care About the Global Water Crisis. We had the chance to visit with her one-on-one about her lecture and some of the challenges she sees on the horizon for the ag industry. Joining us now is the President and CEO of Land O'Lakes, that is Beth Ford. We welcome you to the university. Welcome back to Nebraska.
Thank you.
Well, you gave your lecture here about water. Broadly speaking, 30,000-foot perspective, what was the message you wanted to share?
What I'm trying to do, we have kind of a thought process in our business, and we are a farmer-owned cooperative, also a 100-year-old business, and a Fortune 200 company. So it kind of plays against all areas. What we try to do is say we focus on things with awareness, advocacy, action. Awareness, advocacy, action. Now here at the university, I think, and especially since we're in an ag state, folks are more aware of water, why it's so critically important to the food production. What I wanted to leave a message on was the critical nature of us informing others, of us being in multiple different types of rooms to make sure everybody understood the fragility of the food supply, why water is so critically important to food production. Water demand is set to outstrip supply by 56% globally by 2030. That's in the near end. And then I wanted to say, let's connect the dots. It's not just water, it's ag research funding. And here we are at the university where ag research is a primary area of interest and focus, and why that's so critical. Drought-tolerant seeds, applied research, and that will help us meet that grand challenge of feeding a growing world population set to grow to 9.5 to 10 billion by 2050.
We'll talk more about the funding of some ag research here in a moment. Back on the water challenges. Here in Nebraska, we see our backyard, our front yard, so to speak. A lot of dry areas across the state of Nebraska right now, but from where you see agriculture across the whole U.S. and truly across the world, what are some of the key challenges you think people should be aware of?
Well, water policy and water investment is local, but it has a global impact. And especially on in the United States, food security is national security. I'd say that globally. There's an interconnected nature of food and the food supply chain, food value chain globally. So when you think about investment and when you think about this locally, and here, to your point, there have been areas that have been in drought. If you go to Kansas, they've been in drought. California, they've been in drought. They've certainly had a lot of water over the last number of months, but at the same time the question ends up being, what has been the infrastructure investment on the water capture, the reservoirs? What about over the long term? Do we understand the potential drought conditions? And then how should we think of this? And oftentimes what comes up is some local discussion, not a wrong discussion. This isn't a local versus not, states' rights versus federal, that's not what I'm interested in. I am interested in saying we have to elevate the conversation for primary industries or primary protective areas, in this instance, the food supply, and say whatever decisions we make on investment in areas, especially where production agriculture occurs, it needs to be with somewhat of a lens of saying, what are we going to do to meet this challenge of feeding a growing world population?
So we talk about the investment, particularly on the federal end of things. We've got an upcoming farm bill coming up, obviously. One of the talking points I hear is about China's investment into food and ag compared to the U.S. I'm sure you have that stat fairly familiar. Share with us what that stat is and some of the challenges you see with it.
Yeah, ag research funding at the federal level here in the United States has fallen to 1970s level. That's, for me, a very scary thought. China's outspending us 5-1 on investment because their whole focus, and they've stated this, is to be food self-sufficient. Now, aren't we fortunate? We have some of the best land in the world, best farm practices, great yield, great farmers, et cetera. And we are food self-sufficient, but globally, what leads to geopolitical instability is an inability to feed your family. That's why we see a lot of these climate immigrants coming up from the south. Where was the food? Where were the grains going from Ukraine? They were going into North Africa, another unstable area geopolitically. So all of these things kind of fit together, and here we are in the great state of Nebraska, a production area that is so critically important, and I just want us to make sure that we have that conversation more broadly.